Okay, I'm probably going to have to make this very short because the bus is going to be here in like 12 minutes and I have to go at the very latest by 7 minutes. So I'm just here to tell you guys that I finally finished the Natlan story quest. Up until the Act 4, which is the last act that was released, that is available to us so far for, I think it's 5.2 now. Holy shit, it's 5.1. And I love it. I love the Natlan story quest. It is by far my favorite Archon quest to date, and I don't think it's even close. I think it's Natlan and then Sumeru at like a distant second, and then at a distant third it's maybe like Fontaine, and then after that is Mancha and Liu in around the same place, and then after that is Inazuma. That is basically my Archon Quest tier list for Genshin Impact at this point. And I find that it's kind of hard to articulate why I like Natlan's story quest so much. There are a few basic, like very simple reasons, and the biggest one is probably that it's just much more action packed. It's much more action oriented. There's a lot more combat, I find, and it helps that the world level has also been increased to the point where I feel like I'm not just hitting things once or twice and they're dying. It feels like I'm hitting things 5 times before they're dying, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's like an increase of 125%. So it makes it feel like I'm actually doing combat rather than I'm just hitting like wet noodles. And I also feel like it feels like there's some kind of artificial, like, oh, I'm pretending that I'm being hurt because I'm playing Farina and some teams that actively deal damage to myself while I'm also healing. So it feels like I'm being damaged. I'm at more risk of dying than I actually am, which also kind of helps make the combat more exciting. And there's also the fact that Natlan is just throwing more combat situations, more exploration, more adventure type stuff. I've talked about this in the past, but it feels like the Archon quests have trended towards more like a more intellectual, more articulative, is that even word? It feels like it's getting more wordy is basically what I'm saying, and I'm not saying that Natlan has completely fixed that or if it's even something that needs to be fixed, but it feels like I'm not just like sitting there reading a bunch of text for 4 hours at a time in Natlan. And they have done a very good job of, I probably shouldn't have to worry about spoiling things at this point because you guys have all done the quest before me. So the fact that they actually tried to like simulate a war, and the fact that Natlan was getting war torn, it was being damaged by war, was a very nice touch. I feel like that really sold me on the fact that we're actually getting into some kind of end game, even though there are technical limitations that they have to adhere to. And you can definitely tell that, they can only put a certain amount of objects and NPCs and enemies on the screen at any one time. But they actually threw more stuff at me, more enemies at me than I was expecting. It didn't feel like they were just giving me 1 or 2 enemies to hit to it's like, oh, it's perfunctory, it's mandatory. You have to have some sort of, not endgame, but combat content to make it feel like you're actually fighting something. No, it actually did feel like they were throwing stuff at me to the extent where I was like somewhat convinced that this was like a situation that was somewhat dire. And it just feels good. It feels good to finally feel like we're getting to the point where things have some sort of stake. I was somewhat surprised that Chui Chui or Kui Kui, I don't know what their name is. I was playing the game in English at the beginning, but because of the strike and the lack of voice acting for some characters, I just switched back to Chinese. And it's like her name is like Kui Kui. The sister of Chaska is basically what I'm talking about, who I'm talking about. I'm a little bit surprised that she actually died. And that gives me hope that, maybe a playable character at some point will suffer some sort of loss that is like based on another like playable character. Maybe a playable character will actually die. I doubt it because Honkai Star did the whole playable character might die thing and then they walked that back all the way back. Gallagher doesn't count. He was never a thing in the first place. I have to go now. I wish I could make a longer video on this, but I can't because it's the bus. And yeah, so here's the setting sun. And I have to go. I just really love Natlan. I'm so surprised at how much I like the cast because I went into it feeling the same way I did about Zenless Zone Zero's characters, which is that they just kind of look like, I don't know, they just kind of looked underwhelming. But it turns out I like all of their personalities. There are a few very nitpicky things that I can talk about when it comes to Natlan that I didn't like. Like, I didn't like the whole power friendship thing in the Night Kingdom when Kachina was like, oh, power friendship, we beat the fuck out of the best because reasons. I felt that was a bit weird. I felt a bit too like PG-13. But everything other than that, I really like Silali. I like Mavuika even. They feel fleshed out is basically what I'm saying. I even like Auroran. I wish he was a 5-star, but it turns out that Genshin Impact they don't like 5-star guys anymore. I should probably have made a video about that. There was like a whole controversy about how they're like leaning more towards 5-star female characters, and they don't want 5-star male characters anymore because Genshin is getting less popular. So besides that, yeah, I love Natlan. I have to go. The bus is gonna be here in like 7 minutes, and I wish I could. I really wish I could have made a full-fledged video about this, but yeah, Natlan is great. And I'll see you guys later. Bye.